how do we support all these different wallets, and also shielded SEC? And then, the solution, we'd kind of gone to the drawing board a few times, and we were like, there really isn't a good way to do this with any of the solutions that are out there right now. So the way we, essentially, like, one day I was just talking with the team, and we were like, what if, we just created a key store for the user? Because key store is not super secure, but it is amazing in terms of like the functionalities it can do. It can do so many different things. It can support so many different assets. It's quick, and everything like that. So we said, why can't we just make a key store for the user, and treat it like almost a burner phone? Like you, for example, can buy a burner phone, make a phone call, throw the burner phone out when you're out of minutes or when you make the phone call, whatever.
Yeah. This podcast is sponsored by Coin ATM Radar. When buying crypto with cash, an ATM is much more reliable and safer than meeting some random person in a random place. And unlike an exchange, which could freeze your account, you truly own all the crypto you buy. With Coin ATM Radar, you could find crypto ATMs and other services where you can buy and sell cryptocurrencies for cash. On their website, you can search by coin, address, if the ATM supports selling as well as buying, and you can also search by geo area, country, state, city. You can also check and compare actual current fees at different ATMs. If you want to find out more, head over to coinatmradar.com, which is coinatmradar.com. So, hey everyone, I have the fantastic pleasure of speaking with the one and only Khal of the, as I would call, the Leo Empire. How's it going, man?
Good. How are you? Good to see you.
Pretty good. Yeah, good seeing you too. I'm not exactly sure how to refer to the collection of businesses. Just like I was on a space with Change Now, I believe, today, and then they had Now Payments onto and Now Nodes. I just call it the Now Empire. So same thing, because you got LeoDEX and InLeo, and the two planks of the empire so far.
Yep. Yeah, and then the empire is going to grow throughout the year, so it'll get more interesting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So the big reason I want to talk to you, other than I always do, is this new LeoDEX kind of innovation. And just to set the stage, when swapping with THORChain, the Maya protocol, all those kinds of things, typically you need to connect a wallet. And this has been... It's not that big of a deal for the EVM and the everything else world, because everyone uses something like MetaMask or something. It's just super standard. But for the old school cross-chain world, right, the Bitcoins of the world, the Dashes, the Zcash, all of that, don't really have much connect a wallet, whatever. So it's a big barrier to getting the crypto boomers on board. And so I saw some announcement, and of course we talked privately a little bit about it, but it was still enough of a surprise for me about a QR code swap that basically you don't have to connect the wallet. So would you mind really quick, not really quick, but would you mind just sort of going over why, first of all, why are no other, I guess, interfaces for THORChain and the Maya protocol, etc.? Why can't you just scan a QR code and send? Why do you have to connect it? Why has that been a big barrier that's been unsolved until now?
Yeah, it's, well, to kind of give the backstory of it, and I will keep it quick. We were working with the Zcash community, and we were like, hey, what kind of wallets do you guys use? Like, just asking general questions. And, they had all these different wallets they use. Zashi app was kind of the biggest. And then with Zcash, you also have, shielded ZEC. So, we kind of tried to figure out, well, how do we support all these different wallets, and also shielded SEC? And then, the solution, we'd kind of gone to the drawing board a few times, and we were like, there really isn't a good way to do this with any of the solutions that are out there right now. So the way we, essentially, like, one day I was just talking with the team, and we were like, what if, we just created a key store for the user? Because key store is not super secure, but it is amazing in terms of like the functionalities it can do. It can do so many different things. It can support so many different assets. It's quick, and everything like that. So we said, why can't we just make a key store for the user, and treat it like almost a burner phone? Like you, for example, can buy a burner phone, make a phone call, throw the burner phone out when you're out of minutes or when you make the phone call, whatever.
Yeah, we've all done that a bunch of times.
Yeah, right. So why can't you have a burner phone like you would for a side chick, and just like allow people to make their swap and then toss the phone when it's done? So essentially a key store. Um, and yeah, we looked around and we realized that nobody's really doing this. I think someone told me there's like what is it, tier BTC or TBTC. And they were saying they've got something like this. I haven't even looked into it yet, but I was going to look because they said there were a few interesting things that they've done on this front. But yeah, nobody's done it for cross chain, and it kind of surprised me because I was like, well, we could build this for ZEC, and then we can expand it because I guess the original thing was let's support all these ZEC wallets and shielded ZEC, and then we were like, well, let's build it for ZEC, see how people respond to it, because and we can get into that, but I was expecting a little bit of controversy around it, and honestly, we didn't really get any. It was more people like, wow, like kind of your reaction, like, wow, I can't believe others didn't do this before. So, kind of one fell swoop, we can support ZEC, any ZEC wallet, shielded ZEC. And then, when we expand it, we'll be able to support, the next thing will be Dash and any Dash wallet. And the way I like to say it is, if you can send it, you can swap it, right? So it's like the QVC tagline is like, if you can literally scan a QR code to send the asset, then you can swap it cross-chain without connecting a wallet. And to answer your question, I don't know why other UIs never did it. Maybe there's too much risk, or they just weren't willing to go down that rabbit hole, or just didn't think of it. I don't know. But it does make the user experience, vastly better. I mean, the connect to wallet thing has always been a big barrier. And then the wallet support thing is like another big barrier because, every different crypto has all these different wallets, and all the different wallets have different, kind of nuances to them. But every wallet can send crypto. So, and really these days, every wallet can scan a QR code.
Ideally.
Yeah, right?
There's
some ideally they can all send.
Fishy.
Yeah. So as long as you can send it, you can swap it. That's kind of where I wanted to come from with this. And obviously ZEC being the first, Dash will be the second. And then we'll kind of go from there. And I do have like this whole roadmap now, kind of planned out in my head, and we can get into that. But, of the different things I think we can do with these, which I'm calling swap accounts.
Yeah, for sure. So just to break down how things work under the hood for these kinds of cross-chain swaps, obviously when you have programmatic chains, right, you've got the Ethereums and the Solanas and all the others of the world, it's not that difficult to have them engage with smart contracts to do some sort of a swap. THORChain and the Maya protocol and Chainflip, and there's pretty much not many others but it started with THORChain, have gotten what I would call kind of like the boomer chains on board, where there's been kind of these two big worlds of crypto. There's been the old school, like UTXO, like not smart contract stuff, and then the entire EVM, SVM, etc. kind of world. And they've kind of been, the first world has sort of been ignored, almost like left behind, forgotten, which is weird because if you count Bitcoin, at least, it has almost most of the market capitalization of the space is left behind. And so what you have, in order to be able to do this, my understanding of the way these things work, having looked at a couple of memos myself, and again, for the kids at home, you add like into the whatever data field the blockchain has, like an op return for like a Bitcoin or a Dash. It specifies the details of the swap. So you send into the pool with this little memo that says this is what we want to do, and then it performs a swap. But I have not found a single wallet that I can think of, maybe Electrum, but maybe not even that, that can do op return fields into a transaction in order to send it. So like if I wanted to, as they say, raw dog it and just send an actual transaction from like a Dash wallet or a Bitcoin wallet to swap it, I can't do it. So pretty much everything is through Keystore, or there's been a couple other wallets, but largely there's no way of inputting that kind of field in there other than Keystore. Have you, just on the side note on that, other than, I guess, Control, which used to be called XDeFi, do you know of any wallet that can connect with old school UTXO chains? Or is it basically just through, is there basically anything that's not like Keystore or something that can kind of do these sort of swaps?
That's a good question. Honestly, no, I don't think so. I haven't really looked deeply enough into, the wallets for UTXO chains. I mean, like you said, it's a huge barrier, and at the protocol level, what they're trying to do, between THORChain, Maya, and others, is memoless swaps to get around this issue. So, so yeah, I don't really know if there is one that can get around it. Nothing comes to mind, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's kind of, it's a weird situation. Basically, this is a problem that needed to be solved because obviously memo swaps things at the protocol level, great, even better. But I've been hearing memoless swaps for years now, or a year. Again, I'm not trying to hate on anyone saying that, but I'm saying these things take a long time to build to the protocol level, and there's nothing quite like a fun workaround to make it work in the meantime. So
Right.
it is kind of, this has been something that I've noticed in the Dash community in particular. There was immense interest in cross-chain swaps, but there's been a kind of what I would consider sort of like a failure to onboard a little bit from the Dash community. Dash volumes are pretty low right now, and I think that a big reason for that is people have struggled to actually use Maya because there's few wallets that that integrate Maya for swaps inside the wallet, and there's almost no major interfaces that major Dash wallets can like connect to, as we mentioned, the connection problem. So there just hasn't been accessibility, and this could be a big thing that really onboards the rest of the world that is just not used to using these other things. And instead of a few big traders that have figured it out and then just arbitraging back and forth or doing some big moves, it might be like an everyman kind of swap thing. Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead on that.
No, no. I completely agree with you, and the memoless swap thing I think is really interesting and would kind of, I wouldn't say like make it unnecessary for this workaround, but I think the workaround will, and like I said, with swap accounts, I have a lot of other ideas, around like deeper DEX type features. But the what we've essentially made is a workaround for memoless swaps because it is essentially you're doing a memoless transaction, and then basically the key store that burner account I mentioned is completing the memo part of things for you. But yeah, I agree. It's a huge barrier to entry. I mean, even for the Zeek swaps, like it was, people have shielded ZEC. How do they swap it? And there's no support for shielded ZEC. So that I completely agree. And if you've got like Dash and Dash Pay, like how do you just go to Maya and just use it? I mean, that's how it should work. Is like I go to the whatever interface I want to use. I scan a QR code or I copy an address and I just 1, 2, 3 done. So yeah, I completely agree. It's a major thing to solve in terms of a usability standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go through, I guess, the step-by-step, as they call it, the user journey kind of thing on this, which, I mean, I don't like the term user journey, but whatever, as far as how you use this. So, so let's say I want to go swap something. I have in this case, like a Zashi wallet, because we're talking ZEC. So I want to swap it. So I go to LeoDEX, I go to the site, and I say I want to swap this much ZEC for this much Dash, let's just say. And then there's a QR code scan button on there. I press it, and then it brings up a QR code, right? Is that correct so far?
Yeah, before it brings up the QR code, it will ask you for the recipient address for Dash. So it'll actually ask you, in this example, for a Dash address, and then you paste the Dash address And then there's like a disclaimer about how swap accounts work, because I want people to be safe and understand what they're doing. Check that box and then hit generate QR code, and then it generates the QR code after you've done those. But yeah, everything else is exactly how it's working.
And so then you get a QR code, it pops up, and what happens at that point back end when you have a QR code?
Yeah, so right when you click, so you've entered the Dash address, then you click generate QR code, you'll see like a loading bar. It takes, I don't know, 3 to 5 seconds. What's happening during that loading process is a key store is actually being generated inside of your browser. So a key store wallet's being generated in your browser. There's a mnemonic phrase that's created for that key store, and it's held in your that mnemonic phrase is in your browser. So like if someone's familiar with like dev tools on a browser, you could watch all of this actually happening in real time. So that key store is generated, which means that and this is how you get to the QR code. After that key store is generated, you now have a receiving address, in this example for the ZEC, because the receiving address is the key store's Zcash address, the key store we created for you. That's the recipient address. So after that key store is created, inside of your browser, you now have that Zcash address where you can receive to your swap account. And then the QR code is actually just literally like the amount of ZEC you entered on LeoDEX, and then the recipient address, which is the swap account that was just made for you. So you can either manually, so it gives you the ZEC address, you can either manually just send to that, or you can scan the QR code. So that's everything that's happening, in terms of backend. It's actually not really backend because LeoDEX never, and this is part of the disclaimer, but LeoDEX never has access to the mnemonic phrase. That's entirely held, locally in your browser. So that ZEC address is created, QR code is generated, and then you would scan it, send ZEC to that address, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, and then you're in there. So it's funny you said the QR code. It has the address and the amount. This is something that is known as, I believe, BIP21. It's like an old Bitcoin wallet thing from, I think, 2012 or something, way back in the day, slightly before my time. But having dealt with a lot of merchant tools, you would not believe how many of them have not implemented this. As in, you have to scan a QR code, it gets the address, and then you have to manually type in the exact amount. It is, I wouldn't even say it happens. I would say it's common. So my my thought is coming to, I wonder how many wallets there are out there that don't support BIP21. So when they scan the QR code, they would just get the address. But that's we'll go to that in the troubleshooting kind of like part of this as we're going through. So I send ZEC there, and then what happens? I hit send. It is inbound. And then what?
Yeah, so you hit send. There's a button. So when the QR code's generated, you'll see like a little pop up, and there's a QR code, the address, and then the third thing is a little button that says "I've sent the ZEC." So once you've sent it from your Zashi wallet, let's say, then you would click the button that says "I've sent the ZEC," and then after clicking that, you'll see another dialog that says "Monitoring the blockchain." So what LeoDEX is then doing is monitoring your address, your ZEC address in the swap account. So that when the ZEC is received, and it's like very fast, as soon as the ZEC is received, LeoDEX will then change from monitoring the blockchain to saying ZEC received, and then there's a button that says click swap, and it reminds you again one more time. It'll show you your recipient address and the expected amount. So it'll show, like in this example, your Dash address that you entered, and then the expected amount of Dash that you're going to get. And then the button will say swap, and then you click swap. And what it's doing is it's swapping the ZEC that was just received to your swap account into Dash using a normal, Maya swap. So it's just, it's just literally like the, ZEC swap with the memo, specifying to Maya that this is a swap from ZEC to Dash. And then it gives obviously the Dash address that you entered. And then from there, it's just a normal swap. But essentially, you've kind of like funded this key store, like we say, like a burner account, for this one-time swap. So then it just processes it normally from there.
So I guess you could say it's like the equivalent. I mean, it literally is opening up LeoDEX, connecting a Keystore wallet you own, sending ZEC to the Keystore wallet you own, and then performing the swap, except this Keystore didn't previously exist. And then the UI, the user experience is very funneled for just this swap, not just, oh, I can do all kinds of things with this now.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. It's exactly the user experience of like, making a key store, signing into LeoDEX, funding the key store, doing the swap, swapping into an external address, because you're not swapping into the same key store. You're swapping into like your Dash Pay, address, for example. And that's exactly how it works. And then it'd be like if you disconnected the key store. So instead of all that, we just basically did all of that for you inside of your browser. And then after the swap, actually the mnemonic is deleted from your browser. I forget how long we wait. I think we wait like 24 hours or something. And then it gets deleted from your browser. So the intention is that you never use this key store again. Obviously, a user could technically like go into their browser, copy the mnemonic, save it, and now they have this key store if they wanted to. But it's the intention is you fund it the one time, and then it swaps, and then you're done with it.
Yeah. So let's, I guess, get into like now that that's like the perfect user flow, and obvious the best user experiences out there tend to restrict the user's options as much as possible, almost, as in just find the statistical things that they really want to do and just cut out everything else at every step, so it just feels like yay, rather than getting confused and tooling around. So that being said, first of all, so you let's say you want to make a swap, and it's like I want to do like ZEC for Dash in this case. In that case, the transaction details. First of all, the rate and the amount people would expect to receive. What are the limitations of that? So, like for example, if I want to swap 10 ZEC for Dash, that seems pretty straightforward because you receive 10 ZEC and then you swap during whatever conditions will give you that. Is there a possibility, and this is where it gets really like weird with the DEX world, but is there a possibility to say I need 5 Dash, and then whatever amount of ZEC will get me that is what is produced? Is it possible the other way around, or is it kind of have to be like one way in that way?
It doesn't necessarily need to be one way. There's really no reason. I mean, that's more of a calculation, from the front end perspective. I mean, the only thing that would impact that is like, let's say that the front end, like you're able to say, I want 5 Dash. And then it just tells you, okay, well, you need to send, whatever, 2 ZEC, let's just say. And you send, so then the QR code will essentially just populate and say, send 2 ZEC here. The only thing that could happen is if the price changes, like let's say that, there's some slippage, the price changes, whatever. It may not be exactly 5 Dash. I mean, it obviously would be pretty close unless something crazy happens in the 60 seconds it takes to do this. That would be the only thing. So I would say, like, if you needed to receive a very exact amount of Dash for, say, it's for some use case in particular, like, that would be
a merchant
only
invoice.
Thing. Yeah, I mean that would be the only kind of stipulation there, is like there's really no way to control the exact amount of Dash you're getting, because that's kind of like, once you swap, you kind of see. But if there was some like margin of error there, then yeah, there wouldn't be any issue with doing that.
Yeah. So now let's get into, now that you've created something beautiful, let's try to destroy it real quick. So imagine I have either a wallet that doesn't support BIP21, which in theory could exist, although I don't know if that does exist, or I screw up with a button press and I send the wrong amount to that QR code. So let's just say I want to swap 10 ZEC. I swap 10 point, I send 9.8 ZEC accidentally. Or more realistically, I want to swap 10.1 ZEC and I send 10. So now I have 10 ZEC that gets included there. How does that mess with the whole swap equation now that there's a different amount than we anticipated having in that address?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way it works is it actually is kind of equivalent if the user, was using a key store and they hit the max button. So in theory, like if let's say that I said, and I remember I tested this, but I should test it again because now you're making me think I should test it more. But
Sorry, that's what I do.
no, you're good.
Yeah.
So in theory, like I remember in the testing process, I did stuff like, I filled everything out and I said, I'm going to send half a ZEC and swap it to Dash, for example. And then I only sent, 0.25 ZEC. It basically just functions like a max button. So, whatever ZEC was sent to the wallet is getting swapped to Dash. Really, the calculation was more so for the user to say, like, well, if you're sending, in your example, if you're sending 10.1 ZEC, this is how much Dash you should expect to receive. So obviously, if you send 9 ZEC, you're going to get less Dash. But the key store is going to be cleared out either way. So it's just going to do a max swap for whatever you sent. So in theory, excuse me, you're good. In theory, if you did a 10 ZEC, you filled it out for 10 ZEC, and then you sent 100 ZEC there, it should still do everything normally. It's going to swap 100 ZEC instead of 10. So whatever you send there should be max swapped, because obviously the goal is clear out the key store, and the end result is the user got Dash.
Yeah, for sure. That definitely makes a lot of sense. Now let's hit in let's further ruin this thing by adding more variables. So first off, that does seem to be the intelligent way to get it to work, even if the end result is different than what the user expected. At least it just works. It doesn't go kaboom. But what happens if there is any kind of an issue when you try to hit the swap button? And there, obviously, you can try to control for this as much as you can, but as we know, like the Maya protocol has had Dash swaps halted like 3 different times, I think, sometimes for protracted periods of time. As of recording of this, Arbitrum is currently paused. There have been just some glitches. There's always like some node thing that could happen. There's just so many things that could happen. So you could send your ZEC, hit swap, the swap doesn't work. And then now what? Like, what can the user do now that it just hasn't worked?
Yeah, so if LeoDEX detects that the swap didn't happen, then if you leave the browser and come back, it will say continue with previous swap. So essentially, it'll just sit and wait until you hit swap. So there's like a whole new button that'll show there. So like if you kind of picture, there's like on the route side, there's like the Maya route, which is like a normal swap. Beneath it is the QR to swap button. And if you have a pending swap that isn't completed, in between those two is another button that says finish previous swap. You'd click that, and then it'll prompt you to essentially just finish that last step where you were stuck, which is to click the swap button again. So this is pretty bulletproof so far. Obviously, anything can happen. I'm trying to get a lot of people to test this with small amounts so we can find all these nuances. But, one idea I have is, and we kind of have to think about this a little bit in terms of the best way to do it. But if the swap isn't done within like 2 hours, can we just essentially do the swap for you? That's where things start to get tricky, is like, do you essentially pass the mnemonic back, because then you create some centralization risk, which I don't like. So I'm not a huge fan of this in particular, but we need to think about it. And this thinking was what got someone to send me the tier BTC, can't talk, the tier BTC stuff, tongue twister. Because they said they've come up with some kind of solution for this, where the user is prompted to download a file, even though they're essentially prompted to download a one-time file and delete it later. So we may end up doing it that way instead, where like when you initiate one of these swaps, you have to actually download the file. It creates a worse user experience, which is why we didn't do it from the start. But it does prevent potentially some of these problems. Just out of my personal curiosity, what day, how long ago were you looking into this? The download the keystart file option? Probably 2 days ago, maybe, I want to say.
Really? Wow. What a coincidence, because I was literally messaging you this suggestion on Monday, which is 2 days ago.
Oh, really?
So it's kind of it's kind of funny, but so to sort
Maybe
of brain
I don't know. I don't even remember who it was. It wasn't.
maybe
I don't think it was you.
maybe it was, but
No, it was someone else for sure. But
brain
yeah, I
minds
mean,
think
I would
alike.
imagine you sent it to me too because you think of all this stuff before anybody else has.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thought because kind of it seems like if I send Zek to be swapped for Dash and then Dash goes down on Maya, let's just say that's the thing that happens, although it could be other things, then it's just sort of stuck there unless you do a Dash swap. So a couple of things, and my user experience kind of thing, I've been using centralized swap services since the OG Shapeshift was the only one that could do this. And there's I noticed there's two big things that they always have. One is there's like a refund option, and then there's like a swap ID that you can go to support with later. And so, well, first, just on the refund option, maybe once you get to after you get the deposit into the key, there could be a refund address. It might always be fun to do a refund address in case something happens. So you just put that in, and then if you just keep hitting that swap button, it doesn't work, then you just hit the refund button, and then you just get it back. So that could be one way to mitigate a lot of this stuff. Now, in case something happens with like the browser and you lose access, obviously if there's like a support ticket kind of thing, like if it's centralized, that works. If it's not, if it's non-custodial, that doesn't. So I like the idea of the key store. You can download the file and no password encryption or anything, just just download that. Maybe there's like an optional download key store file for extra thing, and also you can do that later at the stuck stage. Like if you so when you're setting it up, that has like an auto download, and when you click it, you get a QR code and it prompts to save the file. And then if you don't check that box, it doesn't. But then if you send stuff in there and it's just stuck in there and you can't swap it or whatever, you could then refund it, or you could then download the file and just do it yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's probably the best solution. Would be an optional, like you don't have to do this. Maybe we make it like automatic. One of those things where it's like automatically checked, and you have to specifically uncheck it if you just want like the most seamless user experience. I guess is like you would uncheck it, and then you don't have to download a file. So yeah, it is. It's tough because like we're trying to create something that isn't central, like with a centralized exchange, like you said. At the end of the day, like if you're losing anything on a centralized exchange, it's theoretically recoverable because it's all centralized. With this implementation, we have no ability to help you. So like we can help you in terms of like trying to walk you through different troubleshooting steps, but there's literally nothing. We have no access to the key store in any way, shape, or form. So in theory, if it's lost or something happens, it's all kind of on you, which is why we have that disclaimer. I sent the disclaimer to the devs to put on the UI, and they were like, "This is way too long." So I ended up making it shorter, but it's still
That's
super
the short
long.
one. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's the short one. There was a long version, and they were like, "We need a whole new page for this." And I was like, I just want people to know that this is a better user experience, but there are potentially downsides to it. I'm not going to just try to sell sunshine and rainbows, but yeah, I think the best, especially in talking to you about it, I think the best solution would be have a box that is automatically checked right next to the disclaimer that says download essentially a recover, what we'd probably call is it like a recovery file. And it would just download this recovery file unless you uncheck the box. So if you uncheck the box, it'll work the way it works now. If you check the box, it would download this recovery file. And then we would probably add something to the UI where, let's say you get to this where it's swap for Dash and Dash is halted, for example, and then it says cannot complete swap, and then essentially we'd have a button where it says import recovery file. So then the user would import the recovery file, and then they would be prompted to send the ZEC back to themselves. And by the way, a lot of this stuff is made a little bit more difficult. Like the refund address, for example, is made a little bit more difficult with ZEC. this is kind of why I like that we started with Zec, because Zec
It's
is
the
probably the
hardest
most
one.
complex. Yeah, I mean, it's literally the hardest one, because if someone sent it from a shielded address, there's no way to refund it to them. If they sent it from a regular BTC address, we could just refund it back to where they sent it from, in theory.
Yeah. You know what's
So
funny
that's,
about that?
that's the tough part.
That is actually part of European crypto law, right? Mika specifies that you can't have anonymous crypto accounts and one of anonymous custodial crypto accounts. And one of the reasons why Monero is not listed on any centralized exchange in Europe is because you can't do this. You can't just refund it automatically. You have to have extra input from the user. And if you don't get that, then you're stuck with this hot potato funds you can't send back. Whereas that's why Zcash, Firo, I think PivX, some others implemented an exchange address so that that can only receive from transparent. So therefore, if you had a situation like that, like a similar need to auto refund situation, you could always auto refund it back, even if if it was shielded, you couldn't. So just a fun little fact on that. But yeah, that definitely makes sense. Now, as far as the way things work, like you have your wallet that has your own private keys on the wallet, and you're swapping to someone else. You create a temporary, like a one-time use private key on, that's what the key store is, and then you use it and go out. So the sort of loss of funds edge case, I should say, that we're hopefully going to mitigating for might not necessarily happen for an in-wallet experience. So this is a I guess a further question, right? So the biggest reason, the second biggest thing that I think is cool about this, about the QR code swap, is being able to go to a website and do it just like you can right now. But the number one thing is I would like to have on my little phone wallet to be able to pull up and say, I want to receive from Bitcoin. And I show a Bitcoin QR code. Someone sends a Bitcoin to me, and it turns up as Dash in my wallet. Right. So the exact same experience you created, but inside a wallet. Now that does maybe change make some things different, maybe easier, right? Because you have the device that you're sending into, like your browser, LeoDEX. If I go to leodex.io, there are no private keys in it, just as of default. It's a website, it's a portal to connect things, but my phone has it. So I'm wondering if replicating this experience on an app level, instead of a browser key store file, which doesn't necessarily exist on an app, I wonder if you could just take the app's seed and then just generate an address from there, because the same seed should potentially be able to work for different cryptocurrencies, even if you just are using it in a one coin wallet, right? So then maybe you generate the one-time address thing. So if that goes away at some point, you could always look in your history and just say, open this up, and then you always have access to those keys. Is there anything I'm missing in that simplistic characterization of, if it's in an HD wallet, of course, you already have the keys. You don't need a key store. There's no risk. As long as you have the keys to your whole wallet, you'll have the risk for this one-time thing. Is there anything I'm missing with that characterization there?
No, I think you covered everything. I think one kind of interesting point, which I haven't really talked about this publicly, but we're working on a LeoDEX mobile app, which I've talked about that publicly, but I guess not in terms of any of the specifics, where this swap account, and I mentioned there's like this roadmap for swap accounts, and what you just mentioned about the mobile wallet is what kind of made me think about it. And what we're doing is we're kind of layering in this swap account feature into the mobile version of LeoDEX, where let's say, for example, and part of the reason we're doing it this way is because of the Leo merchant stuff, which is a whole other thing. But for example, if you want to accept what you just said, you want to accept Dash, but you want to accept Bitcoin but receive Dash. The LeoDEX mobile app will allow you to do that using the same type of swap account feature, but it's actually generating it inside of the mobile app, and will do exactly the same user flow, but inside of a mobile app, which is obviously, more secure, and then the swap account can be held on to, and things
Yeah.
like that. And then you can actually change the swap account if you wanted to, in the settings. So it will be kind of like I haven't really fully come up with a name, but like a persistent swap account, inside of the mobile app. So anyways, that was kind of just an interesting sidebar on that. But
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I do think the mobile app experience is something that needs to be improved a lot. Um, just in general. I did one of these ZEC QR swaps entirely on my phone, and honestly worked super well. Um, so we're getting there. I think there's definitely a lot of work to be done, but we're getting there.
Yeah, definitely the cross-chain interoperability thing is something that I think is super kind of important because that's definitely something that we've noticed with just a sheer amount of blockchains doing different things. Like it used to be, oh, Bitcoin does everything, and then we have like a, let's experiment with this other thing kind of thing, and then those days are long gone. And it's also at the point where you don't really there is no like it's hard to stay in just one ecosystem, but also for anyone who's ever used like a multi-coin wallet, it's kind of a nightmare in some ways. It's cluttered. You don't get the special features for each chain. Everything is just kind of like lumped together. And there's very few mobile wallets that actually have different features for different coins. So having that one coin experience really helps, but then the world's not one coin unless you're at Maxiland, and it just kind of works out. So this interoperability part, I think, is especially making it less like we're going to have big whales swapping on this DEX, or we're going to have North Korea swapping on this DEX, or whatever it is kind of thing, to bring it to the average person. I think it's a big step. So what are some cool things that you're working on with LeoDEX in the future? I know you mentioned some merchant stuff, and then there might be some other things on the horizon.
Yeah, the big picture roadmap is, the web app is the focus right now, and my goal is abstract as much complexity away as we can from the user experience. I think the user experience of cross-chain is very cluttered, like you said, and it's not just at the wallet level; it's also at the interface level, and things like the QR to swap feature are kind of our like first major iterations in terms of like really taking away the burdens of the user experience. So really just build the best web app we can for cross-chain is the first kind of part of this 4-step roadmap. The second is Leo Merchants. So the QR to swap is actually a part of Leo Merchants, which is, they just kind of go hand in hand, where merchants can accept any crypto, and settle in whatever their preferred crypto is. So if they want to settle in Dash, they can settle in Dash, and they can accept, Bitcoin, ETH, Litecoin, ZEC, whatever they want. So that's been, something we've been working on for a while. And the first kind of iteration of it is on Inleo with our premium. That's kind of how we've been testing it. So, and I'm very focused on IRL payments for that, because I think everyone's kind of chasing this like digital payments, in terms of like online payments. So I think it'll be interesting for us to be coming at it from the opposite angle, which is let's actually go after brick and mortar stores first, where there's a ton of transaction volume. It's also a lot easier. There's a lot of nuances to it, but it's a lot easier to work with, IRL people and merchants. So we're starting with that. And then the third piece of the roadmap is the LeoDEX mobile app, which I just mentioned. We've been working on it. It is like inherently connected to LeoDEX, from a web app perspective. So, we're working on the mobile app. And then the fourth thing is LeoKit, which is, again, all four of these kind of work together simultaneously. LeoKit is essentially like SwapKit, but it's what we use for LeoDEX on the back end. So I think it's just kind of like an obvious end state is that we'll just open that up and it'll be like a B2B product. So with that like big picture roadmap in mind, in the near term, like in terms of today, we're working on the new Leo page for LeoDEX. So the Leo page will let people, Leo's the token for the whole Leo economy, as you like to say, the Leo empire.
Yeah.
And we're working on this Leo page where users will be able to stake Leo. So actually, this morning we deployed the S Leo contract on Arbitrum. So anyone who holds Leo will be able to stake Leo on LeoDEX, and then they receive S Leo on Arbitrum, and 100% of the affiliate fees generated by LeoDEX are paid into that S Leo contract. So I think we're the first interface for cross-chain where 100% of the affiliate revenues actually just flow to the token holders. So that's a huge thing for me too. Is like the team and I, like we all just hold Leo like everybody else, because I know that's like the number one question is, well, if you give away 100% of the revenue, how do you survive? How do you build? How do you pay for development, everything like that?
We gave it away
So
and bought it.
yeah, exactly. So, we've had 6 years of Leo being just given away, on the social media platform. So we've been earning and buying alongside everybody else. And then if LeoDEX is successful, my big thing is like aligned incentives. So, we just hold and stake Leo like everybody else. And, let's say that the team, owns, I don't know, 10, 20% of the Leo supply. Then, if whatever the LeoDEX revenue is, we just get our share of it like everybody else. So our incentive is aligned with everybody else, which is grow the LeoDEX volumes. And then obviously with merchants, grow the payments volumes. With the mobile app, same thing with the volumes. And then obviously with LeoKit, get more integrators. So that Leo page should be live by the weekend, I would say, at the latest. I would say probably Friday or Saturday. So that's kind of like the most near-term thing, and then bird's eye.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. The merchant thing is especially interesting because a couple thoughts on that. The first is starting IRL first, IRL small payments first, especially for a food service type business, is like the nightmare UX type scenario because of just how everything has to be so tight and work perfectly. And so it's kind of it's a challenge that if you manage to make that work at that level, then you just plug that experience in anywhere and it's already best in class. Whereas the online merchant portal thing is the most, I guess, forgiving. And so it is kind of interesting there. And also, I have to say, I have been looking for something like this for a while. And I believe the Mocha folks are working on something similar to that as well, using Maya and THORChain and stuff like that. But a lot of people, there is no good merchant. This is one of those reasons, which, by the way, is the industry experience kind of coming out here. This is one of those reasons why crypto has not received mass adoption for payments. Really, is because if I want to get a merchant to take crypto, there is no good solution for them. Basically, if they're a small person at the farmer's market and they want to hold crypto, that's easy. You get them either just a wallet, or if they have there's like an open source app like BitRequest is my favorite one that just plugs into their wallet and they just receive crypto and it's great. But then if you need some sort of an auto conversion to something into their bank account, some kind of thing like that, there's a few not very good solutions that do not work with their current point of sale thing. So like if they have Square or they have, Shopkeeper, if they got, any number of these point of sale things, they have to download it. They're completely separate things, completely separate company. If it's something like Toast, they need to get separate hardware as well because they can't even run it on that. And just an entire separate thing, and it's just a nightmare. And then, of course, at the highest level, some of these point of sale systems like Square announced they were integrating Lightning payments in the next 6 to 9 months or so right into their software. Clover has some plugins that you can plug in something, so everything can be all in there. But there's still this giant gap between I just want to take crypto and I want to hold whatever random coin people want to send me, and like where things are going for the mass adoption. There's all this middle ground where someone's just like, I just want to take crypto, but I don't like the volatility. And so there you go. It works. Yeah. It fits right into that thing. And there hasn't been something that really works like that. I know I've been pestering a lot of different companies about, can you build this for me? And they're like, well, we're working on this. And like, so if there is a good Leo Merchants thing that does actually work, it could be, the ticket to Valhalla, as it were.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's obviously it's like this multi-trillion dollar, payment processing industry that's out there. And they're just making a absolute killing on these, like the average fee is like over 3%, right? So it's just there's so much carrot there in terms of like what you can go after. Um and and like you said, I mean, I think the IRL, going after it from an IRL perspective is really the best approach in my opinion. Because what you're essentially trying to build is like this whole user flow from the ground up and also a merchant flow at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I think where a lot of people are going wrong with this is that they're doing it all based on software and based on, okay, if you're a merchant, download this app on your phone, then you can
Mm-hmm.
flash a QR code from your phone to a customer, and then the customer can scan it from their wallet, whatever crypto wallet they've got, and they can pay you. And then even if they have it, which most don't, it'll convert it to whatever you want to receive, and then you've got it. There are so many issues with that user experience that I see personally. I've actually experienced it in person because I've obviously used a lot of different things to pay in crypto.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, when we were in Croatia, a lot of people were paying with HBD at the coffee shop.
Yes, I remember that. I was one of them.
Right, I was one of them as well. And one of the issues is they had to. I don't know if you remember this. They had to call a specific guy that was working there. I don't remember if it was the owner or some guy that worked there, so that he could be there in order to receive the payments, because he was the only one that knew how to use the payment flow from his phone, or he was the only one with the app or something like that. So, this is, in my opinion, a huge part of the problem is, okay, it's really cool that you can, build everything we just talked about. But if you build it where it's software only, well, now you need to train someone on how to use the software. You need to make sure that that person is working at that time, with the correct phone or device or whatever. And then, it creates all these issues. So my idea is, and this is what we've done, we've actually created a hardware device that is basically just an iPad loaded with very specific software. And that iPad can sit at a store, and then if the customer comes in and they want to pay in crypto, they just tell, same way you can tell a merchant, I want to pay, if you go to a gas station, for example, you say, I want to pay in cash, or I want to pay with a credit card. Usually they'll say cash or card. You could say, I want to pay in crypto, or there's even a little icon. You just tap it and say pay in crypto. Merchant sees, okay, this guy wants to pay in crypto. It is the same for the merchant as accepting like a credit card, for example, where the customer then scans the QR code to pay in whatever they want. The crypto gets sent, and then as soon as it's received by the Leo Merchants API, it basically completes the checkout process, and even can print a receipt or email a receipt or text a receipt to the customer, and then also the merchant can get it. So there's like a merchant copy and a customer copy, like literally how the TradFi world works. Because you need to, if you want to get the TradFi world, you need to kind of meet them where they are. I don't think you can just bring them into this whole world of software and digitization. So, we kind of control that entire physical hardware experience and then meet it with really good software. And I think that's how you kind of get that killer app for payments. So I think our approach, kind of my TLDR is our approach is to kind of marry the hardware with the software. Because I think a lot of people are kind of trying to leapfrog the hardware part of things, which I don't think is going to work, to be completely honest with you. I think it is maybe going to work in the long run, but, in terms of getting people, you're already trying to get people to accept crypto, which is crazy on its own. Trying to get them to do it all digitally with nothing physical is going to be a whole other issue. So that's my idea for how this is going to go and work. You really need to have the hardware, in my opinion. So we're as focused on the hardware as we are on the software, essentially.
It'll be interesting with the whole hardware thing. One thing I see is really coming on strong, which is a weird challenge for crypto, is near field communication, NFC, tap and pay. And there's some crypto stuff that does that. I remember several years ago, it was like 2020, 2021 or something. that the Dash wallet had NFC capabilities in there, but then no one ever used them, so they sort of like deprecated the feature, and now it's coming back with a vengeance. But it would be very interesting to see, and we've sort of talked offline about some of these options, but to have some sort of an offline NFC crypto, again, not a bank card, nothing with fiat, but a crypto tap and pay to be able to work with that. That could be quite interesting. But yeah, I guess we'll leave that as a teaser. Any other thoughts, anything else I didn't cover, anything you want to show that you haven't already, or further thoughts on this?
No, I think we covered everything. I would just say my only shill would be try out the Zex swaps. The QR to swap feature. We've actually got Dash ready. I just want to get more testing. I mean, the more feedback we can get, and things like you thinking of, the user should be able to kind of download this backup phrase. Before we start adding all new assets and features that I have in mind for swap accounts, I just want to get as much testing as possible. So yeah, if you can test it and give us feedback, that would be much appreciated, and it would help us kind of keep pushing forward on the UX side of things, and hopefully have Dash up and running, inside of a week. I mean, it's like I said, we could kind of just flip it on when we want to. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited.
Well, if what is it? It's Wednesday today. If I release this like early next week, that'll be like a day or two, maybe. Who knows? Maybe by the end of the week, maybe a few, depending on when you're watching this, it could be interesting. But either way, go to LeoDEX and try them out. Follow LeoDEX. Was it LeoDEX_IO on X? What is the handle?
It's just LeoDEX IO.
LeoDEXio.
Yeah.
LeoDEXio on X. And yeah, follow cool stuff. Thanks for being on. This has been a good chat, and see everyone later.